the more powerful tools you'll find throughout 3D Coat, whether you're in the paint room or in a voxel sculpting room, is not so much a tool that you can find in your tool panel, but actually in the E panel, the Spline draw mode. This has been in 3D Coat for quite some time, but it's also been one of the most versatile tools that you can use. It allows you in the paint room to make very special and intricate graphics, just a host of capabilities. And this carries over into the voxel room as well. You can use it for Boolean operations. You can create intricate selections for use with the pose tool, the vox layer tool, the different hide tools, the freeze tool, and so on. It's just a lot of different capabilities in this regard. You can also load a shape from a file, including black and white PNGs. But one limitation is that when you create a spline, this tool only fills everything within. It doesn't really allow you to apply a brush along the curve. Now you have that capability right here in the very center. It's called Spline Stroke. If you hover over it, it gives you a little bit deeper explanation as to what it does. Now during this development, there are a number of enhancements that have been added and carry over to the closed spline draw mode. So let's go ahead and take a look at it. I'm going to first isolate the object that I'm going to work on, and that is the vest. I'll alt-click the little icon here. The next thing I want to do is change the shader to something lighter that I can see a bit better. I can bring the light intensity down a bit. Prior to the introduction of Live Clay and this new draw mode, I probably would elect to wait until I got the model into the paint room and use the Paint with Splines tool. You can see that it has a similar functionality. I can right click and drag to increase the radius on the individual points. I could also toggle hardness and hit escape once I'm done with that. I'll hit escape again to drop that line. Now there were some new features from this tool that were actually adopted in the new Spline draw mode, but they still have their own unique aspects, so it's not a complete replacement. You can just use them wherever they fit best in your workflow. Alright, so let's go back to the voxel room and let's get started on this. What I'm going to do is use Crease Clay, and what it does by default is it actually indents. It's very good for lip wrinkles, wrinkles around the eyes, things like that. It's really, really nice. So I'll go ahead and choose our spline stroke. And what I'm going to do is make sure the symmetry is turned on. I can see the little red dot. It's ever so faint, but I can still see it on the opposite side, so I know for sure. Or I can turn Show Symmetry Plane on. I can see it. But I'll turn that back off so it's not getting in my way. Okay. So continuing on now, let's go ahead and increase the radius size. After creating this initial spline, I can always go back after the fact and change the scale of an individual point or its hardness, and we'll look at that here shortly. I'll turn my symmetry plane back on so I can see right where I need to place this point. Okay. Now when I'm done with the curve, or at least the the initial creation of it, I can hit escape. If I need to continue on, I can just click on it again and continue. I'll hit escape. I'll hover over this one and I can delete it. Alright, and I want to adjust some of these. You can just click on an individual point when it's highlighted, move it. I can also create a new point. When you hover over the curve and you see a green highlight, you can click on it to add a new one. I want to delete this one actually. I don't need quite that many. Okay. I'm going to stop right here momentarily and go over some of the options you have for modifying the curvature or hardness of individual points. If you'll notice, the point is right over by default on the spline itself, and that there is some curvature involved. But if you go to your little toggle here and change the spline type to B-splines, now you can see that the curve from start to finish will be all B-splines, unless you happen to go and individually change the curvature or sharpness of the individual point. All right, so we'll go back to just standard splines. Now I'll go back to the standard curve. You can right click once to harden, right click a second time to create a B-spline for just that point, right click a third time to bring it back to default. Now you can also affect individual points with a table like this. You can change the hardness of individual curves according to the number of the point, as well as enabling B-spline curvature. The next thing we want to look at is apply is the same as enter. Clear is the same as hitting the escape key on your keyboard. Edit pressure profile allows you to designate just how much pressure is being applied, as if you were using a Wacom stylus and applying harder pressure in one area and lighter pressure in another. You can define that here. Oops. Actually, I'll create a point here and a point here to make kind of an S-curve. And so if I wanted more intensity toward the end, I can make it look something like this. I can right click once to harden, right click a second time to create a B-spline. And if I want to remove a point, I can just bring it over the top of another and let go. Like that. I'll hit cancel because I want it to be uniform across this spline. I can also change the scale of individual points by going outside of it, right click and drag until I have the desired scale of my brush radius. I can do the same thing with the bracket keys. And then click over the point you want to affect. So I can affect multiple points if I'd like. Control Z. If I want to create more than one segment or line, I can click outside the initial one. Now hit escape. You can see how that works. I'll hover over these now and delete them with the delete key. Okay, so you can add points. You can also detach this curve from the surface and move it to another part of your object and apply it, or you could reattach it if you like. You can transform the entire curve. So I'll go back to edit points. You can close the spline, and that will just connect the first and last point. The difference between a closed spline on this new draw mode as opposed to the previous one is that this one will fill everything within the curve. This one will fill only along the curve itself, and essentially giving you functionality you didn't have with this one. So let's continue now. I'm going to hover over this one and scale my brush radius just to get the right size, and then I'm going to click on this one, continue our curve. So with that done, I'm going to save this curve. And by default, in your Documents directory, 3D Coat, you'll have a Splines directory. You can place it there if you like, or elsewhere. So you can also load it as well. You can scale points numerically. You can rotate, use numeric values. And I think that covers most everything in the options here. You have a tooltip. And we'll resume now. We'll go ahead and hit the Enter key to apply this crease. Okay. So we've got that squared away. And now I'll go ahead and switch back to Extrude Clay. And I'll hit Apply. Okay, so that came out well. You can zoom in. And so you can see that with this new draw mode and live clay, it really does a bang up job. If I hit the 4 key, you can see it just applied the tessellation only where it needed it. So it did a beautiful job. Very happy with it. And with that, we'll conclude this demonstration of the Spline Strokes mode in 3D Coat.